Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast, sponsored by Helping Hands Remodeling right here in Manhattan. Ryan Gilbert, Cole Carmody joining me, Tim Fitzgerald, for another look at Kansas State football. That is the topic today. Boys, we're doing good. We're doing good. You ready?
Doing well. I went for a nice walk today at Colbert. Got my tan on, or I kept my tan going. It was good.
And relevant to this conversation that we're going to have today, Fitz, I officially cannot wait for the EA Sports college football game once again. They actually added coaches into the game this year. And I keep thinking, what is video game Chris Kleiman going to look like? I'm so excited, and I'm on the edge of my seat. As soon as the game comes out, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I bet Coach looks like every single generic coach in the history of those video games, if I'm being honest.
Can you alter the avatars at all?
I'm sure you can, yeah.
Could you give him a long beard like ZZ Top?
That's going to be for EA Sports, guys. I mean, that's going to be a very tough situation to deal with.
The situation with Chris Kleiman. Hey, we've been a little bit more busy lately than I expected, Cole Carmody.
Yeah. It's been busy. I mean, it's that time of the year. Thankfully, I know that, in your Life of Fitz podcast, Matt Wells referenced this, but it's finally a dead period for recruiting. But that doesn't mean that kids are going to stop committing. There's definitely some of that on the radar for K-State. As I look, they're at 16 commits. That number could get up to 20, I would think, maybe before the fall. But it's been a busy times around the Veneer and the Cats and Dogs studios as well.
Yes, the dogs are exhausted. Folks, if you need some work done on your house, your Airbnb, your rental, whatever you own, Gabriel at Helping Hands Remodeling will help you get that done. He's the man. He's worked on my house in the past, and he will be back to work on it again soon as we refresh our deck, which needs it horribly. But Gabriel is a solid guy. His father was in the business. If you're in Manhattan, you might know who Owen is. He worked with his dad on my house for bathroom remodels and then went out on his own when his dad retired. So here we are. Appreciate them being our sponsor. Got to put this back up because I always forget to do that. Let's get going with your questions from Wabash Station. And folks, we're at 50% off for a few days longer. Make sure you take care of that. Cole and the recruiting team are crushing it. Gills is making sure the site is constantly fresh. We've got new stuff going up, and I'm talking into a camera all day. We'll be following Ian Premer quite a bit. I mean, that's just a huge story, and Cole's all over it. And my DD this morning was all about it. There we go. Questions from Wabash Station. Hold on, I got to find my banners. Okay, show. Oh, you didn't do these right, but I'll roll with it. A lot of national media outlets favor K-State to win the Big 12. Do you feel the same way, or are you of the mindset to wait until the first couple of games to believe this is the year? Ohio Powercat. Yes, I'm both. I really think this team is going to be good, but losing to Iowa State would dampen that. I think Iowa State's going to be really good. I've said this before. Wouldn't be surprised if the way the season starts is the way the Big 12 ends in Arlington between these two teams. I think they're in a real position, and playing each other early, whether, if you're the one that loses, someone will. You've got plenty of time to recover from it. But I am optimistic about this team, and I do want to see them play, and we're going to get a pretty good idea. North Dakota's solid FCS program. Army's always a pain in the butt because of how they run their offense, and they do things so differently. And then you go to Arizona, and I know they got talent. They just weren't very good last year, but it's interesting to start before you really dive full bore into Big 12. You guys?
I struggle with this, but this is a great question. I'm happy we're leading off the podcast with this one. I think that this team has the talent to win the Big 12, like you mentioned, Fitz. Like, there's no denying that this is maybe the most talented team in the Big 12. I think from a 1 through 22 perspective, if you're just going and you're comparing the starters on offense and defense of every single team in the Big 12, I think K-State matches up pretty well. We always do the edge piece before every single game. And when you go through and you do that against other Big 12 teams, I think K-State's going to have the edge in a majority of those matchups. Now, unfortunately for them, it's not played out on paper. You got to actually play the games. But I look at a lot of different rankings and ratings and stuff. It's that time of the year in the summer where we see these kinds of things. And I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but in the Kelly Ford rankings, they have teams who can manage upsets, who can afford clunkers, who need to pull off one upset, who need to pull off two upsets to be in the college football at large discussion. And rankings are always pretty accurate. He does a great job. And he has K-State as having one clunker. And guys, they were one of only 12 teams who had that luxury of being able to have one clunker and still being in the at-large conversation. The only difference is here, guys, is that K-State's going to be favored in every single game. So what does that mean? To me, that means that they have to go nearly perfect. They have to go 10-2 essentially, maybe even 11-1 if they don't win the Big 12 to have a chance to get into the college football playoff. It's an interesting dynamic, but I do think that I'm all in on this team, and my optimism is probably only going to grow the more we get a chance to talk to the coaches and kind of hear everything that's been going on this summer.
I want you guys to think about last year and what you remember from last year. Like, what was last year's season remembered as? And in my mind, it was Kansas State at the end of the day, at the end of the season, went 8-4, and fans are unhappy that Chris Kleiman says you should be, proud of an 8-4 team when fans want more. Like, I don't remember when Kansas State was 7-1. I don't remember the bowl win. Like, I just remember Kansas State was 8-4, and you have people that still maybe aren't happy with that, but 8-4 is still pretty damn impressive no matter what way you look at it. And I bring this up because I said Kansas State was 7-1, had a pretty ugly slip up, of course, at BYU, but was a front runner for the Big 12. And then maybe runs out of gas at the end of the year. What exactly happened? That's neither here nor there. There was a point in time where Kansas State absolutely looked like the team to beat in the Big 12. And I say this all the time, that there's always going to be teams that surprise you, good and bad. So I don't think you can make any real, true, honest, I guess, forecasts until much later in the season. So the question here says, first couple of games, man, and same thing goes for basketball too. It's Big 12 is just an insane conference, and the preseason ratings and all that, man, you can look at that all you want, but until they start playing games, it just doesn't mean a whole lot.
But one of the things I'm really excited about is finding the nuanced differences on both sides of the ball, and special teams for that matter, that they've come up with. I think we're going to see more four-man front from the defense. Might be shifting to it on a more regular basis in the future. Offensively, will they be spreading out the field and using their speed like we saw in the second half of the Great Bowl? I'm really interested about that. But Gills is right. You go through this process, and even if you won those first 6 games by 30 points apiece, your left tackle got hurt. Avery got his knee banged up. We're down 2 cornerbacks. Linebacker depth is a worry. Things have a way of kind of turning south, even in the midst of a good season, and you can see trouble ahead. That's always been a problem for Kansas State, is that depth, that quality depth. And I think a perfect example of it is Ohio State. If they had their left tackle go down or one of their linebackers go down, they would have brought in guys that probably in Powers and Fitzpatrick that are going to be starting for Kansas State. That's their backup. So that's just a huge advantage to power through these situations. And often at Kansas State, when you get to the third string, you're dealing with a walk-on, if they still exist, that isn't fully physically developed because he's in the developmental program, but now you got to play. And I'm going to be really blunt here. I think Chris Kleiman has navigated that better than Bill Snyder at times. I remember everyone focuses on that horrible loss at Baylor that knocked K-State out of the Big 12 chase that whatever year that was. And that was caused in a big part by Ty Zimmerman, the free safety, getting hurt. And they had to put a freshman in there. His backup was a freshman, true freshman, and he wasn't ready for it. It was Dante Barnett, one of the greatest safeties in K-State history, and yet on that day, he wasn't ready to play. He just wasn't up to where he could be. And I think Lyman does a better job of getting those second guys ready. And maybe it's when we see these mass rotations of players, that's a big part of it. And you see rotations of players even in close games. So they're giving everyone meaningful snaps. And I think that's been a very intriguing way to watch him address a problem that has existed in this program for many years.
Before we go to the next question, I'm going to propose that we, on our little banners, go to the last question because we've been talking about it.
Okay. Last question. Here it is. But it's not the last question. It's the last question in our order. We'll have more questions after this. People don't think this job is complicated at all. And I confuse myself every day.
I hope I did this one better, Fitz.
You did. You didn't have room on the other one, did you?
Hey, question askers on Wabash. We can only fit 200 characters here on StreamYard. Keep it short.
He had to leave the long dash out, and that bothered me. Yeah. Will there be a change in defensive aggressiveness with the staff indicating more four-man fronts this season? That's from Powercat Ryan, who always asks great questions. I'm intrigued by this. They went to the three-man front to address a problem with the Big 12. This is one of the things I love about football is it's a constant chess match. Okay, we're going to move our pieces now to address this, what you're doing really well, which is spreading the field and using speed, which has been a Big 12 thing because they don't have the big burly defensive tackles. Offensive lines aren't as, cut out as some at the major institutions. And defense is caught up in some ways. And now we see it. K-State did it. Arizona State did it. Other schools did it. Get that running back going between the tackles, taking advantage of that three-man front is the Achilles heel. And now programs have addressed it. And K-State's going to come back around and look at four-man fronts that gets a little more beef on the field, a little bit less speed. You're essentially probably replacing a defensive lineman for a linebacker or even a safety, the nickel back. That's what I'm really interested in. Are they going to go 4-2-5 or the more traditional 4-3-4? And we don't know, but you got to Big 12 offenses still will chunk it around a little bit, but this gives them the flexibility to shift in and out. I guess that's where I'm going.
Yeah. You bring up the 4-2-5. I think that right now, as the way that this team is constructed, that makes the most sense. And
yeah.
I just think because of the linebacker experience, you don't have an Austin Moore. You've got an Austin Romaine, but you don't have an Austin Moore to pair with an Austin Romaine, if that makes sense. Your second linebacker is going to be a guy who either isn't as talented, who doesn't have the pedigree, but has the experience, or maybe doesn't have the experience, maybe has the talent, but doesn't have the experience. On the flip side of that, you look at the safeties and you look at the cornerbacks, and they have a lot of positional depth there. And so I could see them kind of shuffling in defensive backs and maybe having a more of a 4-2-5 look. But really what this comes down to is I think they want to get their best football players on the field. And right now, their best football players are along that defensive line. I mean, they just are. You guys, you go look at the roster. I just did this as we were preparing for this question. There's probably like 11 or 12 guys who you could say, this guy can contribute, this guy can contribute, this guy can contribute. And like if one guy gets hurt, you're like, all right, we're going to throw him in there. If Toby Osunsami goes down, guess what? You got a Jay Sean Ross. If Travis Bates goes down, guess what? You got a Ryan Davis. Like you have guys so you can put in and they can contribute at high levels. So I think this is more about getting defensive linemen on the field and letting them just go cause havoc, because I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but there was a video K-State football put out with the team making hamburgers, and Cheedy Obiizer looks, I mean, just massive. Like he had like a hamburger that was like gigantic. And I'm like, he probably eats 4 of those a day because that is a massive human being.
Not fat.
No, he's
just massive.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really honest here. Covering a lot of bowl games, interviewing players from Ohio State, even Nebraska, UCLA, the year Kansas State played them in the bowl. There's a physical difference. You can just tell these dudes are bigger. And Cheedy fits that mold. That's a player that's going to be making a lot of NIL to stay at K-State, I believe. I think he's going to have a breakout season. Anything else?
I agree.
Thank you. You did that very well. Okay, I'm going back up to number 2 here, Cole.
Thank you.
The 2012 team was a top team in the country outside of QB. How would you rate this year's team's potential to that 2012 team's potential preseason? Boy, I hit on this too. That was the team that lost to Baylor. Really talented team, really good team. A very experienced quarterback who knew who he was and how to do it. Avery's got a bigger upside than Colin Klein. Colin Klein went to New York for the Heisman. Got third. I think Avery could be better, but they're much different. Colin Klein was a bruiser and runner, and he was a fullback that could throw the ball adequately enough to play quarterback. And he was really good at it. Beat the crap out of him, but he was good at it. So I don't know. I think this team could be very similar to that team and also more explosive. This is going to be more of a speed, rack up points type of team. That's another thing I'm going to look for in those early games. How are they going to balance spreading the field and probably scoring points, which in a shootout puts your defense in a bad spot? How are they going to nuance that to balance it out?
This is. I need you to go, Gilbert. I need you to go.
Dylan fan. I'm sorry.
Yes. Good.
Yes, go.
So you got to go back to previous years, really, in my opinion, to look at 2012 versus right now, because Kansas State's 2011 season was a lot better than Kansas State's year last year. Obviously, K-State in 11 got blown out by OU, but played Oklahoma State tough, and then obviously got beat in the bowl game against Arkansas. But that was a pretty dang good team. And guys, I was looking through here earlier. Of course, you mentioned Colin Klein, but Hubert was coming back, Angelo Peace as well, the backup. Like offensively, Tremaine Thompson, Lockett, Harper, Tannehill, all those guys were coming back. Now, maybe I can get Big B. I can phone a friend about the offensive line. I'm not going to lie. I don't know how many pieces came back from 11 to 12, but the playmakers on offense, everybody came back. And you go defensively as well. Arthur Brown, Meshach Williams, Alan Chapman, Ty Zimmerman, Nigel Malone, everybody, it seems like, was coming back. I was flipping through, and the only one that stuck out to me was Tyson Hartman, that did not come back from 2011. But seemingly everybody returned on a pretty dang good team, whereas Kansas State last year, 8-4. Now I get it. You've got good pieces coming back, and you have solid pieces from the portal coming in that are deemed to be good or should be good, but it's still the portal. They're still newcomers. I know there's maybe not as much of a learning curve or a gelling process that you kind of need to gain cohesiveness like you do in basketball, but there's no guarantees when you're a newcomer, right? I don't care if you're coming from Ohio State, you're coming from a JUCO, right? You're still a newcomer in a new program. You're going to have to learn to play with those teammates. So, that 2012 team, man, just had so much set up for success. Now, I get it. This team's upside, you mentioned Avery's upside is higher than Collins was, 100%. But the floor of that 11 team or that 12 team, boy, looking back at it, man,
they're good.
I mean, so high of a floor.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Ryan, but sometimes I think about this, and you know how like now people in today's generation say that, oh, our music was the best. Like the 80s, 90s music, 70s, whatever generation you grew up in, you believe that music was the best.
Fitz's music is not the best, by the way.
Hey, look, as a child of the 80s, I never thought our music would last.
Wow.
It's weird.
I wish it didn't.
It really has. But
it has. People like it. And I'm like, really? I thought we were just weird. I'm a 70s guy, though.
My point with this is that it's very easy to look back on that team because they did so well and say like, oh, well, look at these guys. They were so good. I'm not saying that they weren't. And I agree that 2011, they had a great season. But you look at some of the guys on that team. I mean, who's to say that Austin Romaine can't have an Arthur Brown type of year? I mean, like, who's to say that Dylan Edwards can't have a John Hubert type of year? Like, there's really, you look at skill level, I don't think that Austin Romaine, and this is going to sound like a crazy thing to say, but the numbers back it up. The preseason accolades obviously back it up. Austin Romaine is not that far away from where Arthur Brown was going into his junior year. And so, I understand the question. I really do. And just looking at Avery and Colin, like, did you guys know that Avery Johnson threw the ball 372 times this year, and Colin Klein threw the ball 281 times as a junior? Avery threw the ball almost 100 more times. That is shocking to think about. And, the teams are completely different. I think this is a great question to generate discussion, but I don't think that the hype for this year's team is unwarranted. I still probably would tend to agree there was more hype for 2012, but you look at the pieces, man, the top end pieces are very, very comparable.
And also the advantage of time to look back and realize how good these dudes were in 2012. And again, you mentioned Austin Romaine. How about VJ Payne? If that kid has a huge season, he is going to be one of the, like a Tyson Hartman, well thought of through the years because of how he progressed from being a true freshman and playing to now. So having that advantage of time and understanding how good those players were, because then they went on to the NFL or whatever the measurement might be. But that offense was Colin Klein running it with Jean Hubert back there with him. And then when the defense kind of got sucked up to worry about the run, there you got Tyler Lockett running around on the backside of your defense with not enough coverage. In some ways, K-State will do that in the reverse, probably spread the field and then come back to the, between the tackles running game a little bit more. I think that will be the balance of playing Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson right there. But I'm eager. I'm excited. I think this team will measure up to some of those great teams. But as we've talked about from the questions, always great from Wabash, you don't know. You got to go play the games, and then you really know. And that's kind of, we got to the end of 2012, and looking back, we can appreciate what that team was about, even though they fell a little bit short of what they could have achieved.
Fitz, let me ask you this question.
Yep.
Tyler Lockett was a freshman in 2011. He had 18 receptions for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. First of all, what do you remember about Tyler's freshman season? Was there a lot of hype around it? And then this is going to bring me to a question that I'm sure we're going to talk about at the end of this podcast. But there's another freshman coming in on the offensive side of the ball who has a lot of hype in Linkon Cure. Is it crazy to think that he can have that same kind of impact that Tyler had his freshman season?
Yeah, and you know what? That's a nominal, impact. But because of what he did to a defense, it was magnified. We may not be throwing the ball to you, but the defense knows we better have a safety that can get over and cover if he runs past someone. So those are the impacts. I think Linkon Cure will have his own impacts on how defenses address K-State, but we'll see how they address it, how they handle it. But yeah, the teams are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's K-State football is about owning time of possession, being physical, being disciplined in the right place at the right time. And those lasting lessons have passed from Snyder to Kleiman. They both coach the same way.
Another angle, guys, just real quick. We talk about, Cole, you mentioned Romaine and some of the guys who can really step up and be those dudes this season. But, you go back to 2011 to 12, they didn't lose a Jacob Parrish. They didn't lose DJ Giddens, Brendan Mott. It seems like everyone returned. Whereas from last season to this season, you do have guys going off to the NFL and all conference defensive players leaving your roster. So that's just kind of another reason why I think it's personally just 2011 to 12, man, that was set up for so much success where there are still some question marks right now in late June.
But don't you think that kind of speaks to the depth of where this program is? Like there is that hype and they can lose those guys and there's still a lot of hype there because everyone realizes that there's probably more depth on this team than there was on that team because look at 2013, 14, like the years after 2012, like it, decreased not just in win total, but in depth and just, I want to say program stability, but it just started to trend down after that. I think that the depth of this program and where Chris Kleiman's built this program is part of the reason that there's hype there. It's because there's been no evidence to suggest that these guys just can't step in and produce very similar results.
Yeah. Well, nails it on the head with 2012. It was proven to be a fragile team.
Yep. Let me give a little inside stuff here. And one of the great strengths of Bill Snyder and what also kind of drove fans crazy was he did not play you unless you were ready to be played. but there were exceptions. That the physical attributes were just too great to not find a way to deal with it. Michael Bishop would be the first one I address that to, and everyone still talks about Justin Swift, the tight end, standing up. Well, Big B will tell you, Justin Swift was calling audibles. He was reading the defense. That was not Mike's thing. Mike was a player. After the snap of the ball, Mike time. Before the snap of the ball, here, Mike, this is what you need to do. And that was the way he was getting around that. And that happened with the 2012 team too. Arthur Brown is a freak player, but he didn't really cut it in the NFL because he wasn't always lined up right. It was Ty Zimmerman making sure he was in the right place pre-snap. It was Ty Zimmerman kind of running that defense, getting everyone in line because he is so smart as a coach's son. You take him out of the equation, the defense looked lost at Baylor. It just did. And, and as I said, you replaced truly an all-conference type of guy with a true freshman who Bill Snyder didn't really want to play but had to. He should have played him more earlier in the season in blowouts. Should have had him further progress, but it's just a different way to handle things between the coaches. And Chris Kleiman does put a lot of emphasis on having the backups ready. But you still got those players that you really can't replace. And for Kansas State, one of those players is named Avery Johnson. So if he's injured and limited, you're limited. But he's still better than probably the backup. So you stick with him and deal with it the best you can.
Best example of that fits is the COVID season. Chris Kleiman would rather play a game and lose by 50 and give his backups experience rather than just simply forfeit like some other teams did.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been – nobody would have blinked an eye if he had told Iowa State, we don't have enough dudes. We just don't. We can't play. We're going to have to postpone. No, he moved a linebacker to safety and off we go. Let's go play. And it didn't work out well. But the guy's got that experience. And that's I'm looking down the road. I'm not worrying about the moment. The season is, a mess. It's trash. There's nothing really can be gleaned from this other than the fact that we could get a lot of young guys actual game time experience. He handled it the right way. And people still point to that 4-6 as a failure. No, the COVID season was a great success for Kansas State because it set up everything that's followed.
Yep.
Yeah, I know this has been a long question, but I think it was you, Cole, in Ames after the Iowa State game this year. I think you asked Kleiman what the message is to the team, and his message was play the bowl game because that's the importance of getting those snaps, the experience, those young guys. It means so much just for them to get on the field.
Ready to move on? Here we go. This is from KSU Royals Cat. You did a nice job here, Gills. Do you prefer Matt Wells on the field or in the press box during games? And if you think on the field, who do you think should be in the press box to help the offensive play calling? It's a great question. Because if Wells is on the sideline, I want Brian LePack up top. But now your offensive line coach is up top, and I don't want that. But if you haven't listened to Life of Fitz podcast, I'd ask him about it, and he thinks he's going to be up top because you can't see the field. I don't think your general fan understands what a crappy view the field is. Now, if you've ever sat on the front row of a football game, you get an inkling of what it is because you can't see much because all the players on the sideline. And now, you've got that ground level view if you're on the field. And now that the field doesn't have the hump in the middle, that was for, water runoff when the drainage was less sophisticated. That's just one of my favorite football trivia things, running downhill. That was literally what you did. You got it broken in the middle and you ran downhill and picked up speed as you went down the slope. And coaches still use that phrase. But at some slopes, and I think K-State was this way, you really couldn't see the other sideline because you were basically in a hole with a hump in the middle and they're in a hole. It's crazy how things have changed. But, yeah, on the field is a crappy view still. We asked Chris Kleiman about plays after the game. He goes, I'm going to have to watch it. I don't know. I saw a replay on the board, but we're on the road and, you didn't see anything that was good for us. But, I think he'll be in the box. He's really confident in his QB assistant coach. And I think he's confident in Avery. Avery might have needed him last season. But now he probably feels good that he can handle all that over the phones.
I think Brian the Pack should be in the booth too, guys. I
He's
think
brilliant.
both of those guys need to be up there. And you have, your assistant offensive line coach in Drew Little, like that guy, he is another very experienced offensive line coach. And to me, coaches use the expression, the hay's in the barn, right? There's only so much you can do on game day. Well, on game day, the hay is in the barn, which means that in my opinion, it should be all hands on deck on how do you get into the end zone. And if the answer is you need to have your two best offensive assistant coaches in the booth, then you need to have your two best assistant offensive coaches in the booth. And if the offensive line struggles, then maybe you make some adjustments, but there's going to be plenty of veterans on that offensive line. And Sam Mack, Taylor Potier, George Fitzpatrick's played a lot of football. They're going to be able to figure it out. And I just don't know how they're going to function, quite frankly, if they don't have two big-time offensive coaches in the booth, because then again, you're putting it all on one guy, and that just doesn't seem to go very well.
I agree with that. And the NCAA altering the rules where now you can have more people can carry the coach title and responsibilities. Because even if you were an analyst, you were limited in what you were supposed to be able to do. And now they're assistant coaches, special teams coordinator, and they can coach on game days. They can do all that. And I think that changes the equation a little bit on putting the pack up or down with Wells. So I am interested to see how they handle it. You made a really interesting point too in that podcast, was that the stadium in Dublin, the coaches' boxes are a crappy view. I'm worried about where we are for media. If the coaches got a bad view, what are we back in the Temple Bar District, which I'm fine with. I'll do it from there.
I'll watch it from there with you.
If we're required to do that, we're probably going to need a ride to get to the stadium because we won't be able to walk. No, it's close enough to walk. We just won't be able to. But yeah, I think that'll be a good test of what he wants to do, is what happens in Dublin. And if they have a bad experience with it, heaven forbid, then maybe that changes when they come home the next week.
Great interview, by the way, Fitz. With
He's
Matt Wells.
great.
That was good. It was good
He's
stuff.
great.
I'd recommend
He
anybody.
reminds me so much of Marcus Watts. It freaks me out. They look the same. Their mannerisms are the same. It's crazy. But he's a good dude. He's a really good dude. Yeah. Tech screwed him so bad. He was 5-3, guys, after that loss. Yeah. He had more wins than he had the first two seasons because he inherited a horrible team and then had a pandemic. He's heading for bowl eligibility. And they didn't want that. They had decided to make a change. I love Kirby Hocutt, but I think that was unfair. And you can judge now whether or not the season will be telling. Was that a good move?
It's a K-State thing. Get coaches fired, I guess.
Yeah. God, that was a crazy year.
But with regard to, calling plays and stuff, I mean, let alone what we think. If I was a K-State fan, I would want what Matt Wells wants.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's got the resume to make that decision. Now, if this was maybe a Connor Riley conversation where, he's much more offensive line centric, making the move to being a coordinator, I think you could maybe entertain that with your own opinion a little bit more. But man, just give me whatever Matt Wells wants.
Yep.
He knows what he's doing. He's been a head coach, should not have been fired, like you said, Fitz. So I trust Mr. Wells.
Last question of the podcast, and El Camino, we're going to let Cole handle this because this was literally part of what I talked about on today's daily delivery. There we go. From the great El Camino Cat. Compare and contrast Linkon Cure and Ian Premer. Is it Premer or Premer? Yeah, the two dudes, the two tight ends from Kansas. They're both freakishly athletic in different ways. This is what I said on my daily delivery. Premer's the basketball player, which is really good stuff when you're a tight end. Having those instincts to post up, make your hands available. He's a great basketball player. And Cure is a freak hurdler. He's fast and he can jump and run. They're two different types of athletes, and yet both supreme athletes that I think actually complement each other. The thought of having those two on the field together in 2027 or whatever, be elite. Yeah. Elite tight end play.
You've got Linkon Cure, who is a 3-sport athlete, and you've got Ian Premer, who is a 3-sport athlete.
Yeah.
They both play basketball. Ian's a better basketball player. It's, pretty fair to say. I've watched Linkon play basketball, and the reason he's a basketball player is because he can jump out of the gym, and he's the most athletic guy every time he steps on the court. And Ian plays baseball, and as you mentioned, it fits. Linkon is an elite track and field athlete. Let's not forget that Ian Premer is also like a first-team All-State 5A baseball player. Like at that size, running around out there in the outfield, like that's unheard of. But they're both really good athletes. I think that right now, and I shouldn't say right now because it's obvious right now, Lincoln's a year older. He's a little bit probably more ready to play. He's a little bit more advanced. Now, because Ian plays a little bit better competition in the state of Kansas, I don't think that gap is necessarily that large. Like there is a big difference between playing for Great Bend and playing for Goodland. Like there is, and that's not a knock on Goodland. That's not a knock on Great Bend. But the difference between playing at Great Bend and K-State and playing Goodland and K-State is still just as significant. Like there is a learning curve there, and I think that wherever Ian decides to go to school, if it is K-State, there is going to be just a little bit of a learning gap, maybe from a physical standpoint. You look at Linkon Cure, and he's ready physically to contribute on the field. I think Ian is close. I don't necessarily think that in 365 days from right now, we're going to be sitting here talking about Ian Premer the same way that we're talking about Linkon Cure if he ends up committing to K-State. That's not to say that Ian won't play, because I do think he has a great chance to play whenever he steps on the field. You guys know I'm really high on Linkon Cure. I think he can be an immediate contributor, and he can be one of the best tight ends in that room from, the middle of the season on, whenever he figures it out. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the case for Ian Premer, but I do think he has the potential to be just as good as Linkon Cure. Both of these guys are NFL-type tight ends. That's what people don't understand. These are the tight ends who succeed in the NFL. I'm not sitting here saying that either one of them is going to be a draft pick, but I'm also not ruling it out because they both have immense potential.
Yeah. And your discussion of who might play early and not gets back to those athletic traits. Linkon Cure brings something to the tight end room, which is really good. You have 4 dudes coming back that can all play. But he brings that speed athletic element that they don't quite have. And it's not like they're big hulking guys, but he just is different. He can go play a little wide out. He can. Premer's a little bit more like the other guys. So he brings less to that room, maybe. Maybe in a year that will be a little bit different. I don't know. But certainly in 2 years, if he's redshirted, he will slide right in and begin to play. It's really promising. I'm fired up about that tight end room. I love tight ends, and I'm talking football.
On that note,
that's it. Gilbert, you got any thoughts on this? You're going to give me a yes?
I agree.
Thank you.
I'll give it that.
That's it for the Powercat Podcast. Lots of coverage coming at gopowercat.com. If you missed it, Ian is not going to have a big public announcement. He's just going to roll it out. Just watch X, watch Instagram, get ready. When he announces, you will be the first to know, because when he makes up his mind, he's going to do it. And as far as we know, Cole, it could have been this morning before we posted this podcast. We'll find out. Stay tuned at Go Powercat. And of course, thank you to Gabriel at Helping Hands Remodeling. Go check him out at mhkremodeler.com. Thanks, everyone. We will talk to you real soon.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.